Dr. Karthik Rakam Sir is the president of the Pharmacon Society for Pharmacy Practice, India. Dr. Karthik Rakam Sir is also working as a medical advisor for Health Cloud AI, the winner of Ayushman Bharat PMJ Startup Grand Challenge, which was organized by the Government of India. Dr. Karthik Rakam Sir is trained to work as a clinical pharmacist in Tertiary Care Center, where he had designed optimal therapeutic regimens in complicated cases of tuberculosis and HIV. Thank you very much for sparing your time and being here, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Can everybody hear me? Is my voice audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So thanks, Manjari ma'am. Actually, you ignited certain emotions in me. So I thought of delivering completely different points than what I was prepared. So 20 years back, in 2001, I was diagnosed with TB. And maybe on this day, 20 years back, I was taking some TB medications and going through a hell. I thought of not sharing this, but because of some reason, I felt I could talk about it. And that time, the reason I'm talking is you will understand it later. So I was seeing my family going through a lot of suffering because of my health condition. And I did not feel like sharing my problems with them. So I'm sure many patients will be in such situation where they don't want to add more problems to their patients, their parents, or members in family. They might be looking for some professional like a doctor or a community pharmacist or a clinical pharmacist or anybody who approaches them. So they might be waiting for such opportunity to share their problems and get some relief. So that is how patients go through. That is what patients experience with the deadly disease. And with me, unfortunately, I did not have a great experience from professionals, doctors. Whenever I went and whenever I wanted to talk, all they gave me was 2 minutes time, where I could not even tell what I was going through. And they used to simply say, everything is fine, please go. And after 2 years of all that suffering, when I went there and I did not find any relief, then they simply told me this might not be TB, it might be some other disease. Get admitted again, we will evaluate you and we will take the next step. So I was so upset. Every 15 days, I was visiting a doctor, getting all the tests done, showing the reports, showing the medications, but I did not get any counseling or emotional support. Forget about emotional support, but even the basic support on how to take medications, etc. And now again, I remember one more point. The first 6 months of therapy, and I did not show improvement in weight or appetite. All I was having was a glass of fruit juice with difficulty, and I don't know how I survived those days. I'm happy that I'm alive today to talk to all of you. So after 6 months when I went and there was no response, it was shocking for me to hear. The doctor said you might be using medications of substandard quality. That is why it might not be working for you. And I thought this guy told me about this point after 6 months. Okay. So that time I was, I think, 8 or 9 year old. I was not knowing what was happening. All I was going through and suffering. So yeah, I wanted to share this before I my talk. Yogi, actually, you can share. Actually, I was not looking to share that. Yogi, you can share my journey. I wrote a small blog on the days I went with TB and how I overcame, etc. I will put in that box. You can read later. Okay, so now the actual topic, TB and AMR. Next slide. So I will start with definitions. So don't ignore definitions. There is a lot of thought process, discussions happen before they come up with a definition. Don't ignore. So actually, when I got an invitation to do this talk, I was looking for the most recent definitions and terminology. In the process, I landed up reading few documents and I realized how much thought process goes into coming up with a definition. Okay. And most of the times we simply ignore what is there in definition and we use all our own language to define it. So I will directly talk with definitions of some resistance. So there is something called isoniazid resistant TB, in which that organism is resistant to isoniazid. So you should not stop at saying resistance to isoniazid. You should also say resistant to isoniazid and susceptible to rifampicin. Okay. So we should. And then there is rifampin resistant TB. So they are not susceptible to rifampin, or we can say they are resistant to rifampin based on drug susceptibility testing. And along with isoniazid and rifampin, the other two first-line agents are pyrazinamide and ethambutol. So if the organism has resistance to them also, other first agents, we call it polyresistant TB. Next. So XDR-TB, the previous definition is 2006. I will not go through the definition, but the most recent definition is from 2021. So we will see that. And for that, there is a term called pre-XDR-TB. Last time, when I was giving a presentation, this definition is not exist. It was not in existence. So now there is another term called pre-XDR-TB, where the organism is RR-TB and MDR-TB with additional resistance to fluoroquinolone. So MDR strain with additional resistance to fluoroquinolone is called XDR-TB. And then we have XDR-TB, which is MDR-TB or rifampin resistant TB with resistant to fluoroquinolone. It means pre-XDR-TB plus resistant to another, at least one additional group A drug, which include levofloxacin, moxifloxacin, bedaquiline, and linezolid. So these are the definitions. Next. And I'll just talk, earlier speakers talked about burden of TB. So here there are some facts. So in 2019, approximately 2 lakh cases of MDR TB are detected and notified. So, but that is an underestimate. Only represent 44% of the estimated ones, and even estimated ones can be an underestimation. So at least 2 lakh MDR TB cases are notified, and 1,000 XDR TB cases are notified from 81 countries, and India is occupying a prominent place in, unfortunately, in those countries where XDR TB cases are. So coming to outcomes, the outcomes are poor actually. Only 57% of people completed treatment. I will tell the definition, what it means by treatment completion, cure, etc. So only 57% successfully completed the treatment. Okay. So really poor. And the reason is because it is MDR TB, it is very difficult to achieve cure compared to drug susceptibility. Yeah, and why should we worry about resistant TB? I have given some facts here. It's very difficult to treat. Treatment is complicated. Duration of treatment is very long. As Majirima was telling, it can go up to 2 years. Okay. Treatment outcomes are very poor. It is estimated that MDR TB will kill 75 million people in next 35 years time. Okay. And Sunita ma'am was talking about AMR. So if 3 deaths happen because of AMR, 1 death will be because of resistant to TB drugs. Okay. Treatment options are limited. The drugs are highly toxic, lot of ADRs. They are expensive. So there is a statistics shows to treat drug resistant TB, you spend 1,000 times more. For example, if you are spending 1 rupee to treat susceptible TB, you'll be spending 1,000 rupees to treat resistant TB. And there is an example again in South Africa, 32% of budget is consumed to take care of resistant TB, though it accounts for only 2% of cases. So this is not proper way of utilizing the resources. Okay. And these medications are not always available. You can go to previous. These medications are not always available like the first-line agents, and it is difficult to achieve cure, difficult to stop the spread. And this MDR TB can progress into pre-XDR TB and XDR TB. And the other reason why we should worry is we have a goal of eliminating TB. And if it was just drug susceptible TB, maybe there are chances of achieving the target. But because of resistant TB, it is extremely difficult to achieve the targets which each country has set for itself. There is huge economic burden also. So this is the most important slide in this presentation. Yogi, next slide. I'm talking about the 2 kinds of resistance, primary resistance and acquired resistance. Unlike this COVID virus, the bacteria which causes TB naturally does not mutate and develop resistance. That is extremely, extremely rare. It can be less than, I think, even 1%. 99% of the times, the resistance is acquired resistance. I will explain what it means. So it means actually an individual is exposed to drug susceptible TB. Okay. Then he is infected with drug susceptible. Because he is infected, he develops active drug susceptible TB. Once he develops active drug susceptible TB, if he gets access to diagnosis and treatment, he will be exposed to TB drugs. But if the treatment is incomplete, or if the quality of drugs is not proper, or patient stops taking it before the completion of therapy, whatever reasons, if the treatment is not completed, ineffective, substandard, then this active drug susceptible TB gets resistance, called acquired resistance, and converts into drug resistant TB. And then again, patient gets exposed for second line agents and further resistance. Okay. So acquired drug resistance is the thing which can be addressed actually. We cannot do anything with uh, the drug resistance if organism develops it through its natural mutation. But fortunately, that is very rare. Acquired drug resistance is where we should focus all our energy. And I will tell you a few reasons. And at the end, I will share my experiences also. A few points which can help you to address. Okay, next slide. So I have listed out these factors which contribute to drug resistance. We have classified into like provider-based factors, where basically doctors are responsible, and drug-related factors, especially the pharmaceutical industry involved here, and patient-related factors. Ultimately, patient is the one who has to take all the medications. So these are the three broad reasons. So coming to healthcare providers, not following the guidelines is the bigger reason, and poor patient education. And basically, they don't have time to educate the patient. And from my experience, diagnosing is a challenging thing compared to treatment. So basically, when doctor makes an accurate diagnosis, 90% they are happy. And when they start appropriate therapy, 95 times they are happy. It's 95% they are happy. But the other important thing which lacks is the monitoring. That is where a pharmacist will come into picture, which is important, which is ignored by other healthcare professionals. So they don't monitor the treatment. Happy by making an accurate diagnosis and starting appropriate therapy. And coming to drugs, here actually I'm reading the point like poor quality medications, but I experienced it 20 years back. Okay. And sometimes the medications are not available. They are not stored properly. We don't have proper combinations. And actually, last presentation when I made to this college, I gave an example. Doctor intention is to give a combination of isoniazid and rifampin, but for some reason, patient ends up getting only either isoniazid or rifampin. So patient thinks, doctor thinks patient is taking 4 medication, but patient is only taking 3 medication. And when somebody goes and evaluates their medication, they will realize patient is only taking 3. So if you are subjecting susceptible organism which needs 4 drugs and you are giving only 3 drugs, you are encouraging it to develop resistance. That is why it is acquired resistance. It is not because of that organism. It is because of our fault and not treating it appropriately. It develop resistance. Okay? And coming to patients, they don't have information. They have fear of ADRs. And honestly, believe me, I was going through hell when I was taking this medication. It used to take me around 1 hour in the morning to finish taking all the medications. Take one medication, wait for 15 minutes, wait for some more time, take again another medication, control the urge to vomit. And patients lose appetite, don't take like taking food. And that malnourishment again contributes to worse outcomes. Okay. There are social barriers. They don't feel like disclosing it to their own family members or relatives, etc. And on top of it, if they have HIV, the outcomes are worse. Diabetes don't respond well. Malabsorption. And here I have made many interventions, especially isoniazid and rifampin. They have to be taken before meals, before breakfast. But because the patient is not educated, or even if they are educated, they might not understand the reason why it should be taken on an empty stomach. So they happily take it after food. Absorption is decreased by 50%, contributing to poor outcomes. Okay. So every point which I mentioned this in this slide can be addressed by a clinical pharmacist. Unfortunately, what we are doing is carrying a lot of information in our head, but we are not putting it into practice. So it is like having a kitchen with all stove, gas, all material, necessary to cook proper meal, but you don't take any effort to cook a meal and eat. So there is no point of carrying all this information in head and not putting it in practice. Especially as a pharmacist, we get this opportunity every day to implement our knowledge and make a difference. Next slide. So what can we do to prevent drug-resistant TB? I'll give more specific points later. One simple thing that can be done is take TB drugs exactly as prescribed by healthcare provider. Okay. Don't miss any doses and don't stop the treatment after you show symptomatic improvement, because like let's say you start taking these drugs for 2 or 3 months, all your symptoms will go, your appetite will improve, you will feel healthy, you will feel everything is fine, and you will feel like stopping the medication. But not do it, because the organism can develop resistance. You complete the treatment course. And if the patients face any trouble taking medications, talk to their healthcare providers. If doctors don't give time, talk to a pharmacist who will definitely give time and try to come up with some solution. Have a mechanism where we can quickly diagnose, follow the recommended guidelines, monitor the patient's response, and we should make sure the treatment is completed. At every aspect, actually, I made an intervention during my internship days. And if patient has drug-resistant TB, isolate them and try to avoid exposure. Next. So there are different things which we can do to and support the patients. Important is health education and counseling. And there are certain things called treatment adherence interventions. You can be using a tracer or a digital medication monitor. You provide material support, psychological support, staff education. So don't underestimate the importance of psychological support. That plays a huge role. And there are certain strategies in treatment administration also. It can be a community or home-based or direct observed treatment. And it is superior over unsupervised treatment. Okay. It can be done by a layperson or a healthcare provider who is trained, compared to a family member or compared to administering the treatment unsupervised. And there are certain new things like video observed treatment also. Now today, we don't have to meet at a place to observe this conference. We can sit at our home and do. Okay. Next. So actually, as all the speakers were telling, came together as a team. I'm really fortunate to be working with this core team of IPS CPD, Ajvaidya sir, Manjari ma'am, Sunita ma'am, Yogi, and myself. So we have taken upon certain initiatives, and we have many other initiatives in pipeline. So currently, Jan Andolan, your college is definitely involved here. And we are also recently launched a national-wide antimicrobial resistance program. And we are doing events for World Health Days. Recently, we did World Health Day. We are planning Hypertension Day next month, etc. We are looking for interns to join our team, and I'm sure you will have a great learning experience. You will get a thorough mentorship, and if you are expecting a certificate, we will give that also. All we need is maybe 4 hours of a week commitment, and if you are interested to involve, make a difference for yours and for others. So Yogi, you can thanks for giving me this opportunity. I would like to show you a guideline or a document from where I collected this information. Check that PDF. The reason I'm telling this is, especially for students, only when you know things, you can put it into practice. First step will be knowing things and learning things from proper resources. Once we achieve the first step of learning, second step will be to implement it in practice. And for learning, I suggest you to start with a standard textbook. And my recommendation will be to start with DPRO, which covers every disease extensively, especially with pharmacists first. But textbook again is limited, because let's say if you read tuberculosis chapter in DPRO textbook, maybe it will be 15-20 pages. But all of us have spoken about how challenging it is to manage it. When you think you can learn everything how to manage this highly complicated disease in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or by reading 10 pages in a textbook. But reading a textbook gives you an understanding. You will know certain things. But ideally, if you really want to make a difference, you should not limit yourself to a textbook. You should read guidelines. Okay? Here, if you see, this is a 120-page guideline given by WHO and only on drug-resistant TB. I'm comparing it with the chapter in textbook. A chapter in textbook has 20 pages, and in the 20 pages, only maybe 2 or 3 pages is dedicated to discuss drug-resistant TB, which I think will again give you basic, brief understanding, but not enough information to make a difference. So start with the standard textbook and go with the guidelines. Yogi, actually, you can scroll it down. So here, the treatment guideline is only for drug-resistant TB. If it is drug-susceptible TB, maybe it will be again 150-page guideline. For TB alone, we have 500 pages guideline which discusses everything which everybody should know to manage it appropriately. Hold on, scroll down. And if you read this, actually, you'll thoroughly enjoy. So this is the contents. I'll not, keep the content. So I was talking, right? Yeah, go up. Keep the contents page. Up in the sense like page number, contents. I gave a definition, right? So I said isoniazid resistant TB. So what should be done in isoniazid resistant TB? Then rifampin susceptible TB, you can see. Then rifampin susceptible TB actually is treated like MDR TB. What are the shorter regimens for rifampin susceptible TB? What are the longer regimens for rifampin susceptible TB? Then the other, like what all things should be monitored when you are taking care of patients with MDR TB. Okay. And then because TB and HIV most of the time go together, it is like an offer. Okay. So you should learn about antiviral therapy in patients with TB. And then what is the role of surgery and care and support? Yogi, actually go to this research gaps page. There are, again, in spite of so much information, there are a lot of gaps in research. So you can keep scrolling it slowly. So all this can be taken as your 5th year PharmD projects. And if project is there in BPharm, it can be taken. A lot of information is generated. Lot more information needs to be generated to address the research gaps, which as a pharmacist, which we should try to fulfill. Hold on. Still down. I just wanted to show this. Where are the research gap in terms of care and support for patients? This 8. So section 8 talks about care and support for patients with MDR and patient support and treatment supervision interventions that are best suited in particular population. WHO has given some recommendations like, let's say I gave a recommendation called video observed treatment. But how well it will be effective in countries like India, which comes under low and middle income countries? That is a question mark. A lot of information is not there. Maybe that strategy might have worked well in high income countries. But here, how does it work? We are not sure. So now we talked about psychological support. What psychological support is more appropriate for our patients? There is a gap there. So all these gaps definitely require a proper research. And once we come up with good data, we can serve our patients better. And this can be taken, because why I shared this is, if a 5th year student send me a message, hi, I can assume that they are going to ask me PharmD project suggestion. And if 6th year students ask me, they send me hi, most probably they are going to ask me how should I make use of my internship properly. Okay. So there are many things to be done provided you are interested. So that ends my presentation. If I still have time, I can share maybe 6 or 7 points which are more applicable in hospital setting, which can help you as the TB better. If not, actually, we are planning a workshop. Unfortunately, because of this pandemic, we could not do it offline. We will definitely do it. And I'm sure I will spend 4 hours doing that workshop where I will discuss everything thoroughly. We wanted to do it, in fact, last month. At night when we planned, next day, government announced that all education. Yeah, so thank you so much for presentation. So as I said, to conclude, we have so much information in our head. It is time for action. We should put in practice. Make sure at least we make one TB patient better. That is as good as anything. So still I have more time, or
Sir, if you would like to add a few points, or if there's anything else, you can go ahead, sir. Please.
Sure. So I'll take 5 minutes and add and stop my video. These are extremely relevant in hospital setting. Okay. like I listed those points based on that. Yesterday I sat for some time and listed out certain things which you might miss. So I will tell the definition of cure. So we cannot simply say, okay, we started the patient on treatment and doing well. So cure means treatment is completed as recommended without any evidence of failure, and 3 or more consecutive cultures taken at least 30 days apart are negative after the intensive phase. So, like, I really love reading that such kind of information and trying to understand. So, when can we call a patient cured? So, first criteria is the treatment should be completed as recommended. Second, there should not be any evidence of failure. Then we should do 3 cultures, and this culture should be taken at least 30 days apart. For example, if you take culture on 1st March, next culture should be after 30 days. And this should be taken after intensive phase. Let's say intensive phase is 2 months. You should not do it during intensive phase. You start treatment, wait for 2 months until intensive phase is over, then take a culture, then take another culture 30 days apart, and you keep taking so that 2 consecutive cultures should be negative. Let's say first culture is negative, second one is positive. So you cannot call that patient cured. Okay, so that is how effective the definitions are. And maybe let's say if you are seeing a patient of TB in your hospital, you should make sure patient fulfills all this criteria. Only then you can call him cured. Otherwise, you should not be classifying it as cured. Okay. So the other important point which most of the times is missed is, let's say if it is not a pulmonary TB, let's say it is CNS TB, you should choose drugs which achieve adequate concentrations in. Yeah, it should achieve penetration in meninges. Why? Because let's say patient has TB meningitis. You have given 4 drugs, but out of these 4 drugs, one drug does not have enough penetration into meninges. The organism will be exposed to only 3 drugs, and because it is not exposed to 10 drugs properly, that can develop resistance. So in first line agents, actually, ethambutol does not have adequate penetration into CNS. So you can suggest ethionamide in place of ethambutol if you are looking to treat a patient with TB meningitis, and this applies to other TB drugs also. You make a list of all the TB drugs which has enough penetration into meninges and recommend those drugs if you see a patient with TB meningitis. Okay. So next other important thing is there is a risk of seizures for certain MDR and XDR TB. You use carbapenems. So there are many carbapenems, but if patient has risk of many seizures, you should go with meropenem. Let's say doctor has given imipenem and cilastatin, and patient developed a seizure. Most of the time, what happens in hospital setting is a doctor does not think it is drug induced. They think it is disease induced, and what they do is they add a drug for epilepsy or seizures. They don't really think the seizure is because of medication. I have seen few cases where patient developed seizure with carbapenem, and healthcare provider added 3 drugs for seizures, and still it was not under control. I made an intervention. I said this drug might be causing. They withdraw the drug, and simply the patient responded better. So that is one factor to keep into consideration. Is about ADRs. Let's say patient developed an ADR seizure, and he really it is scary. Patient will not feel like taking that medication. So as a pharmacist, we can ask them to go for a better alternative which has less potential to cause. So, and another important thing is most important. This I have seen many mistakes happen. I read that statement. If a person is infected with a strain, and if that strain is resistant to any one TB drug, and if you are giving that TB drug to patient and adding one more TB drug, the other drug which you added will also develop resistance. So it is very, very, very important to know the drug susceptible status before you initiate and recommend any drugs for patient. Did you understand? Let's say patient has resistance to isoniazid. Without being aware of this fact, you started isoniazid, and along with isoniazid, you started rifampin. So there are chances that rifampin will also get resistance. So that results in getting resistance to other drugs which patient is already not resistant. It is very important to individually check the drug susceptibility pattern. But if that is going to add to cost and if that facility is not available, so you should take population level data and then recommend treatment. These little things can make a huge difference. Okay. And the other thing I wanted to share is about the adjuvant therapy that can be given in TB. So if it is TB meningitis and if it is cardiac TB, along with TB medication, outcome will depend whether you give a corticosteroid or not. So whenever you come across CNS TB and cardiac TB, you should make sure doctor gives them corticosteroids along with TB medication. And like you can make a note of this drug: cycloserine, terizidone, isoniazid, linezolid. All these drugs has a potential to cause B6 deficiency. So whenever you come across a prescription with these drugs, as a pharmacist, you should recommend them B6 supplementation. Okay. And we have seen, right, in MDR, XDR, TB, patients will be receiving a regimen containing fluoroquinolones. Okay. And when fluoroquinolones are there, and if patient is taking a vitamin supplement like calcium, iron, zinc, etc., especially the divalent cations, they have interaction with fluoroquinolone antibiotics. They form complexes that decreases their absorption and leads to poor outcomes. Okay, because I think most of the time when I ask for an interaction, the common interaction I get is tetracycline with milk. In that way, there are others also, especially divalent cations with fluoroquinolone class of drugs which are used in MDR and XDR. And the other reason why patients don't tolerate is failure to adjust the doses in renal impairment. Patient has TB plus renal impairment. And if you continue to give them full doses, just like you are giving it to a patient with normal renal function, they are more prone to develop toxicity. As a pharmacist, we should assess the patient's renal function and we should adjust the TB drug doses based on their renal function. Pyrazinamide, ethambutol, levofloxacin, cycloserine, dapiromycin, kanamycin, streptomycin, amikacin. All these drugs require dose adjustment in renal impairment. And actually, this was my daily job. Whenever when I went on rounds, doctor used to tell me adjust the doses of whatever drug is required in patients with TB. Okay. And maybe other points we can discuss later. I will end with a question. So the other important toxicity with TB drugs is hepatotoxicity. So generally when we read, okay, if patient has hepatotoxicity with TB drugs, give a hepatic sparing regimen. But the fundamental thing is, how can you say or when can you say patient developed hepatotoxicity? That is ignored. And honestly, even I ignored when I read TB in my third year. In my fifth year, I learned it. So most of us are aware that with TB drugs, it can cause hepatotoxicity. And if patient notices hepatotoxicity, give a hepatic sparing regimen. My question is, when can you call it hepatotoxicity? Okay, so I will leave with this question. You can always reach me like Srinivas sir and many students I'm connected. Send your answer on WhatsApp. Okay. So thank you so much for this opportunity. And today we came together and this relation should continue. And we should not restrict ourselves to just giving talks. So we have enough motivated people. We have enough knowledge with us. We have enough passion and commitment to do certain things. So this should translate into action. So thank you so much.